listening to the Heartland Author Podcast. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For today's episode, I had the honor of interviewing Kylie Mort. Kylie, who is from the Australian state of Victoria, is the author of the children's book Little People, Big Emotions, and is a contributor to the Tammy Pike compiled nonfiction book, Empowered Women Empowering the World, Inspirational Stories from Women Who Are Creating Change Within Their Community and Beyond. I'm here with Kylie Mort, who is an author from Australia. Kylie, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Thanks so much, Aaron. It's great to be here.
Now, feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners, and I understand you're a little more than just an author.
Yes, certainly. I've got quite a interesting career. The author bit came mostly in the last 5 years or so, but generally I've been a teacher my whole life and resigned from education some years ago because I thought kids were being overlooked in the school system, so I thought I'd do better as a tutor. And then being a tutor, I went back to university and started studying psychology and studied coaching and neuro-linguistic programming and even hypnosis, and looked at all the different ways that I could get involved with the human brain and better understanding the human brain, and that led me to connecting with a lot of different business people. And my first book, Empowering Women, Empowering the World, was a collaborative with other Australian successful women, business women, and we looked at the ways in which our businesses grew and looked at our own stories, and through doing that, really I started to connect with sharing tips and strategies on how to best help young people as a holistic coach, not just as a tutor. The book, the multi-award winning Little People, Big Emotions, the children's book, grew from there.
Now, you mentioned Little People, Big Emotions, which is your children's book. Without spoiling too much of the book, what is it about?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I wrote the book during the pandemic, actually, because I had a lot of parents connected with me, concerned about, suddenly they were parents, but they were also teachers, and concerned about how they were struggling to support their young people who are also, reacting to the situation. And I wrote Little People, Big Emotions. It's very much about mental health and resilience and helping children to identify the fact that it's okay to feel emotions and they don't have to become their emotions. Emotions are a signpost. It's something that is giving them information about underlying needs, but they don't have to be carried away by them. And doing it this way was really helpful also. I noticed with the way I was writing it that my own daughter suffers with inattentive ADHD, and a lot of the strategies and the tools that I put into the book are things that really work with my own daughter. My son, I work the same way across the board, and we have the same strategies, but for where my son, it's just really helpful and speeds things along. For my daughter, it's very much a lifeline for somebody with that kind of diagnosis.
Yeah, I have an autism spectrum disorder myself. I know ADHD usually isn't considered part of the autism spectrum, but there are some similarities between the two.
Yeah, I think that what needs to be understood the most is that everybody is very unique and everybody learns in a unique way. And I think that if people are going to be best supported to be their best selves, they need to be given the tools and strategies that are going to work for them. And one of the reasons that, I've known, being my profession, I've known Kenzie deals with this diagnosis for a very, very long time, her whole school career, but I never actually got it labelled as such until I was forced to through the education process, because I think that sometimes when people take on labels, it can be very positive, but other times people can, feel weighed down and pressured by a label. So I think it's really important for individuals to know that even a label, it's something that they can work with, and not something that should be taking away from who they are as an individual.
Little People, Big Emotions was illustrated by Tina Morton. Did I pronounce the illustrator's name correctly?
You certainly did.
Tell us a little bit about Tina, and what was it like to work with her on your book?
So yeah, Tina is fantastic. I've actually never met Tina face to face, because obviously having produced the book in the last 12 months or so, she lives in Perth and I live on the other side of Australia. And so we've never been able to connect because of the travelling distances and that kind of thing. But there was a lot of to and fro between the two states, because it was very much a way that we needed to work together to figure out my interpretation and what I saw from the narrative, and Tina's interpretation of it, and really coming together with that. And her illustrations are just divine. I love them. They're so good. But we did have quite a different view of the monster, which is the antagonist in the book. And, Tina wrote the monster, or drew the monster, as, one of those monsters that children have fears that, not to detract from their fears, but their fears that can easily be supported and allayed by adults, whereas I had a much deeper, more sinister version of the monster, growing up from my own experience of childhood abuse and trauma. So I was sort of like, no, the monster is dark and scary. We need to make the monster worse. And so we took my monster and her monster and sort of came together, and now the book has a beautiful illustration of our monster, which is very much in between.
Now, this likely didn't get much attention on its release date because your book that you co-wrote with a ton of different authors, Empowered Women Empowering the World, had the misfortune of being released on January 6th, 2021, which here in the United States was the same day as the attack on the U.S. Capitol. So I'm not sure if Empowered Women Empowering the World really got that much publicity, but tell us a little bit about the book, and what was it like to work with so many of your fellow women on the book?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I didn't actually put that connection together. Wow, I'll definitely remember it now. It was the first book published, so it was the first time I got published, and it was very much born of one of those business network friends coming to me and saying, hey, look, you've got a really interesting story. I think you should share it in this collaborative. And it was very much working through looking at what had created my success in business, so my earlier journey, and then after that, Empowered Women Empowering the World, I was part of another one called Back Yourself, which is very much more of a self-help kind of book with the business angle. So where Empowering Women is more empowering a personal view, Back Yourself is giving really good strategies on how to become a female entrepreneur. And with that one, in chapter 1, I talk about knowing your niche and working to that. And that book, Back Yourself, the second one, it it was an Amazon bestseller when it came out, so it did a little better. But then with, coming to Little People, Big Emotions, it was sort of putting together a 3-step process of the first book focusing on, the personal development coming through that trauma, the second book focusing on my career as a business person, and then the third really niching down into my passion of helping young people.
Now, in addition to Little People, Big Emotions and Empowered Women Empowering the World, are there any other books that you have written or co-written?
Yeah, there are actually. So Empowered Women Empowering the World was the first, then Back Yourself was the second. There's another one called Amazing Women of Influence was the third. And by the time I wrote for that one, I'm sort of like, okay, I'm done with the collaborative thing. Like there's so many different excellent books that you can get that explore in short snippets the lives of successful people. But I thought I really need to just niche down into what I actually wanted to do, was to help the young people. So that's why I wrote Little People, Big Emotions, which is the children's book directed at a younger audience. And then from there, I actually jumped into app development, which is where most of my writing goes now, because that's an ongoing writing process.
Now, I actually had this question listed a little bit later in the interview, but since you mention it, in addition to your work as an author, you've developed Apple iOS and Android apps titled How to Write with Kylie Mort. How did you develop the app, and is the app only available in Australia, or is it available in other countries as well?
Good question, Aaron. It is available worldwide, and I sincerely hope that your listeners definitely check it out and have a look. Coming from my experience of 2 decades of being a school teacher and now being a holistic coach and having private clients, I do a lot of essay writing with them, and so there was at one point I had quite a large tutoring company in our town, and then during the pandemic, of course, Victoria was one of the most locked down places in the world, and so that was locked down, and I couldn't run that facility anymore, so I went online, and I swore I'd never go online, I'd never teach online, because I liked the one-on-one, really digging into who the student was and what their needs were. So I did some more study and found out about, the ways that you can teach without actually being physically present. And that led to thinking, okay, well, if I can develop an app, I can be helping people with their writing without actually being there, and then through the app, as people complete their essays or complete the templates that I've got there, I can just give feedback to the varying degrees that they would like. And so it was definitely a roller coaster. I know nothing about app development, so I actually went through 3 different developers, just trying to really get someone who could make the vision come to life, because I wanted to make it something where young people or writers of any age could pick it up and work through the question and answer format very much like they would if I was sitting there with them. So, for example, I've just finished another essay on Animal Farm by George Orwell, and with that essay, I have written the essay myself. Then through the app, I then break it up and explode it into question and answer format. So by the time you finish answering each of the questions, there was 32 questions in that template, and press complete, you have a fully written essay on that Animal Farm book or whatever book that it is that we're doing. So as you work through the app, you have a question. The question also has an example there to show you how I have answered the question. So as well as getting the questions, you're also getting a professionally written essay example as well. And I find that lots of my clients, when they're really struggling with getting their thoughts down on paper, a lot of it is just, I don't know how to format it. I don't know what sentence you want me to write. I could be working with a young person who knows the text really well, but you ask them to write a sentence about it and they get confused about where they need to go. So this was very much an app that I developed to help people get their thoughts on paper, to help people just go through that process of taking their knowledge and showing me or showing their assessors or their readers exactly what that knowledge may be.
Now, I'm going to pivot back to the question that I had before the one about your app, and this is about the book publishing industry in Australia as opposed to the book publishing industry in the United States. What are Australia's major traditional publishers, and are there any major differences between self-publishing a book in Australia and self-publishing a book in the United States?
Aaron, you're definitely touching on information that I'm not very good with, because I haven't gone with any of the major publishers in Australia. I know that there is a process where you can write your manuscript and take it to one of the big publishing houses and knock on the door and keep knocking on doors until they say yes. But it wasn't my experience to do it like that. My first, as I said, the Empowering Women, Empowering the World was the first one I got involved with. I got involved with that through being asked to write for it. And that publisher I'd never heard of until I worked with him. Then with the second book, I was a finalist in the Australian Awards. And it was through the company that had the awards that they then invited their finalists to give their professional input into a book that would collate the information from the awards. And it was through that company that I found Serenity Press and Karen, the publisher for Little People, Big Emotions. And honestly, when I wrote that book, Little People, Big Emotions, I just flicked her an email and said, "Hey Karen, I was one of the authors in this last book. Here's something I've put to paper. What do you think?" And she said, "I love it. It's brilliant. Let's go with it." And they literally, the editor changed but one word in the whole manuscript. So I think that there's so many different easy ways that you can get involved with publishing with professionals in Australia. I'm not sure of Australia. America. I've got a US friend who is still writing her first book. So I should certainly ask her about her experience with publishers and seeking publishers and see what she thinks, so I can add some more to the conversation next time. But yeah, that's about as much as I can tell you from my own, humble opinion.
Yeah, here in the United States, there are like 5 major companies that control nearly all of the traditional book publishing industry, and then you have like smaller presses, and then a few different kinds of self-publishing. And for traditional publishing here in the States, you usually don't deal with the traditional publisher directly. You usually deal with a literary agent who acts as an intermediary between the author and the traditional press.
Yeah, well, I haven't experienced going to any of the big presses, but I don't know of anyone who has a literary agent. I do know people who have self-published. I know quite a few self-published authors, and it seemed that if I went with a publisher, I would get a lot more support in their distribution channels, in their marketing and advertising and that kind of thing. And that's why I went with a bigger publisher and didn't self-publish. Having said that, I'm just not sure how I can add to the conversation without personal experience there. don't know a lot about it.
Okay. Now, on your website, there was some kind of references to coaching services, and was that writing coaching services or yoga coaching services?
So yes, Aaron, you've touched on the fact that I have quite a few different career angles. I am a yoga teacher, yes, but I'm also a diesel mechanic, if you want to throw in some really random things. Um, but with the coaching, I've got private clients, and they're anywhere from very little primary school people to adults and university students and that kind of thing. And I like to market my coaching as it's holistic coaching. It is Kylie Mort taking all of her resources from her toolkit and helping you be your best self. So if I had to, pinpoint a few different things that I help people with, I help with maths and English and literacy through the primary and secondary cohorts. But then I also help with emotional coaching and that kind of thing through yoga therapy, because I don't actually have a yoga studio and teach classes. I actually one-on-one teach people how the mind and the body can connect to support their holistic growth. I work with personal coaching that involves self-reflection and digging through past traumas and abuses to overcome those. It's very personalized depending on where you feel like you have a block. It could be that somebody wants to write their own story. I have a lot of people contact me because I've written for Empowering Women, which was about personal experience, and Back Yourself, which is about business experience. So I have a lot of people contact me and say, hey, I need help with my business, or I feel like I don't have my purpose in life. So there's so many different angles that you can help someone when you're a holistic coach, and you just use everything that you've been through and all of your qualifications and backgrounds to help people be their best selves.
Well, Kylie, that was my final question, so I thank you for appearing on the Heartland Author podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Aaron. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, sir.
With all due respect to the numerous other guests I have interviewed or will interview for this podcast, Kylie Mort is one of the most awesome guests I've ever had the opportunity to interview, and I thank her for appearing on this podcast. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding you all to write your imagination, whether your emotions are big or small. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/authoraac. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook at authoraac and on Instagram at aacscribe. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/authoraac. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook at authoraac and on Instagram at aacscribe. Copyright 2022, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.